The ham sandwich looked pathetic on the plastic tray. Diego Santos stared at it. Limp white bread, processed cheese, a handful of potato chips, a plastic cup of water. Around him in first class, other passengers ate grilled steak and fresh salmon on fine china plates. Crystal wine glasses caught the cabin light. The smell of expensive food filled the air. "This is your meal," the flight attendant said. Her name tag read, Christina. Her voice was cold, empty. Diego looked up at her. "I ordered the steak." Christina's smile was ice. "This is what's available for you." The words hung in the air of Pacific Star Airlines Flight 219 from Manila to Los Angeles. Passengers in nearby seats went quiet. Some looked away, uncomfortable. The elderly woman in seat 2B gasped softly. "Excuse me, there must be a mistake." "No mistake." Christina cut her off, then walked away. Diego pulled out his phone. His hands were steady, though his heart pounded with familiar pain. He photographed the sandwich, the empty space where a proper meal should be. Christina's name tag as she walked away. Then he typed a message to his assistant. "Luis, prepare the legal team. Emergency board meeting tomorrow morning at Pacific Star headquarters. I want every executive present. No exceptions." Luis responded immediately. "Confirmed." "They don't know yet, do they?" Diego typed back. "No. Let's keep it that way until tomorrow." What Christina didn't know, what nobody on this plane knew, was that 3 hours earlier, Diego Santos had finalized paperwork, making him the majority owner of Pacific Star Airlines, 65% controlling interest. The airline she worked for was now his. "I'm Martha," the woman in 2B said, her voice shaking with anger. "And what just happened is unacceptable." Diego turned to her. Martha Rodriguez looked about 65, wearing a colorful dress with Mexican embroidery. Her dark eyes blazed with righteous fury. "It happens," Diego said quietly. "That doesn't make it right." Martha was already cutting her salmon into portions. "Please, share my meal." "Thank you, but no." Diego placed his hand gently over hers. "I need to keep everything exactly as it was served." "Evidence." Martha studied his face. "You're going to do something about this?" "Yes." "Good." She sat back. "I'm a retired teacher. 40 years in Los Angeles schools. I've seen discrimination in every form. But this? In first class? In 2024? She shook her head. "What's your name?" "Diego Santos." "What do you do, Diego?" "I work in technology. Software, mostly." Martha waited, sensing there was more. But Diego stayed quiet, watching the flight attendants whisper urgently at the front of the cabin. Christina was showing something on her phone to another attendant. Their faces went pale. "They're looking something up," Martha observed. "The internet makes it hard to hide," Diego replied. At the front of the cabin, a loud American businessman was on his 4th glass of scotch. "Hey, sweetheart," he called to Christina. "How about another drink? And maybe your phone number?" Christina forced a laugh, though discomfort showed in her eyes. "Right away, sir." The man was wearing a wrinkled, expensive suit. He'd been rude to every crew member. But Christina served him with a smile. Diego watched this, filed it away. 5 minutes later, Christina approached their row again. Her confidence had vanished. Her hands trembled as she carried a beautiful plate of steak with roasted vegetables. "Mr. Santos." Her voice cracked. "There was a terrible mistake with your order. Please accept this meal with our sincerest apologies." "No, thank you," Diego said calmly. Christina blinked. "Sir?" "I'm satisfied with what I have." "Mr. Santos, please. I want to keep exactly what you decided I deserved." Diego's voice was quiet but steel underneath. "Now please, leave me alone." Christina's face went white. She backed away, nearly stumbling. Martha leaned close to Diego. "Who are you?" Diego was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, clouds stretched endlessly over the Pacific Ocean. "My father was Ernesto Santos," he finally said. "He worked as a baggage handler at Manila airport for 25 years. He'd come home at night with his back broken, his hands cut from metal latches. He made so little money that some weeks we ate only rice and salt. Nothing else." Martha listened. "When I was 12, My mother saved for 6 months to buy a plane ticket. Her mother was dying in another province. She wore her best church dress to the airport. She was so excited. She'd never flown before. Diego's voice got quieter. The airline staff looked at her clothes, her provincial accent, her calloused hands. They said her ticket was probably fake. They wouldn't let her board, even though it was real. She took a 15-hour bus ride instead. By the time she arrived, her grandmother was dead. Martha's hand went to her mouth. My mother never tried to fly again. She said planes weren't for people like us. Diego touched the sandwich on his tray. 30 years later, I'm in first class, and they serve me this. Because I'm wearing jeans. Because my skin is brown. Because they decided I don't belong here. What are you going to do? Martha whispered. Diego looked at her directly. I'm going to make sure my mother's story doesn't happen to anyone else. How? You'll see tomorrow. Diego allowed himself a small smile. Would you like to come? To the meeting? You're a witness. Your testimony matters. Martha's eyes lit up. I wouldn't miss it. The plane began its descent into Los Angeles. The captain's voice came over the speakers, announcing their arrival. Diego remained seated as other passengers gathered their bags. Christina and 2 other flight attendants stood near the cockpit door, whispering urgently. The captain emerged, his silver hair perfect, his uniform crisp. They briefed him in low voices. Captain James Miller's professional expression cracked. He glanced back at Diego, then looked away quickly. Mr. Santos? A crew member approached nervously. The captain would like to speak with you before you disembark. Tell the captain I'll speak with him at the meeting, Diego replied. Sir, there's no need for... There's every need, Diego said firmly. Tell him the conference room at gate 51. 10 minutes. The crew member hurried away. Martha gathered her purse. This is really happening. This is really happening, Diego confirmed. They walked off the plane together. At the gate, a sharp woman in a business suit waited with 2 airport security officers. Mr. Santos, she greeted him professionally. I'm Luis Reyes, your assistant. Everything is ready. Thank you, Luis. Diego still carried his tray with the uneaten sandwich. Several travelers stared at this strange sight. A man in jeans carrying airport food through the terminal. Behind them came Christina, Captain Miller, and 3 more flight attendants. Their worried whispers echoed in the jetway. They entered a large conference room. Inside, 5 people in expensive suits sat around a table, looking confused and nervous. The man at the head stood up quickly. Diego! I didn't know you were on that flight. If I'd known, I would have arranged... Arranged what, Richard? Diego interrupted. He set his sandwich tray in the center of the conference table. Everyone stared at it. Diego recognized Richard Chen, CEO of Pacific Star Airlines. They'd exchanged exactly 3 emails during the acquisition process. Richard had no idea what Diego looked like. This, Diego said quietly, is what your first-class passengers receive when they have brown skin and wear jeans. Silence. While other passengers ate steak and salmon on china plates, your flight attendant decided I deserved a ham sandwich and chips. When asked why, she said this was what was available for me. Not what was available. What was available for me. Christina stood near the door, tears starting. One of the executives, a woman in her 50s, cleared her throat. Mr. Santos, if you're implying discrimination... I'm not implying anything. Diego cut her off. I'm stating facts. Luis? Luis opened a laptop. In the past 18 months, Pacific Star Airlines received 1,247 complaints about discriminatory treatment based on race, ethnicity, or appearance. Of those complaints, only 9, less than 1%, resulted in any meaningful action. The executives shifted uncomfortably. 9, Diego repeated, out of 1,247. Richard Chen wiped sweat from his forehead. Diego, I'm sure this is just what? Diego's voice rose for the first time. Just an isolated incident? Just a misunderstanding? Just bad luck that it happened to the new majority shareholder on his first flight? The room went dead silent. Majority shareholder? Richard's face went pale. You're the investor who bought 65% controlling interest in this airline this morning. Yes. Diego walked slowly around the table. I didn't buy Pacific Star for revenge. I bought it because it has good roots, strong infrastructure, and potential for growth. But I also bought it because of what happened to my mother 30 years ago. He pulled out his phone and placed it on the table, showing a photograph. An elderly Filipino woman standing outside an airport, tears streaming down her face. Diego Santos. My mother. Denied boarding on a Pacific Star flight because your staff decided she looked suspicious. Her ticket was legitimate, her visa was valid. But she was poor, she spoke with an accent, and she wore cheap clothes, so your people assumed she was lying. Diego's voice got quiet again. She never flew again. Ever. She died 5 years ago, still believing that airplanes weren't for people like us. Martha spoke up from her corner. I watched what happened today. I'm a witness. That flight attendant looked at Diego and decided he didn't deserve a proper meal. I saw it happen. Oh, Christina sobbed openly now. I didn't know who he was. That's exactly the problem, Diego interrupted. You should treat every passenger with respect, not just the ones you recognize as important. He pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. Here's what's going to happen. Starting Monday, every Pacific Star employee begins mandatory cultural sensitivity training. This training happens quarterly. No exceptions. Richard started to speak, but Diego held up his hand. Second, we're creating a passenger advocacy department. Every discrimination complaint gets investigated thoroughly. Results report directly to me monthly. He placed another document down. Third, new hiring strategy. Our staff will reflect our passengers' diversity. Fourth, updated service protocols with clear consequences for discriminatory behavior. Diego turned to Christina. You're not fired. She looked up, shocked. But you have a choice. You can accept a severance package and leave today. Or you can stay, attend every training session, and help build the new program. You'll also write personal apology letters to every passenger who filed complaints about your service. All 37 of them. Christina wiped her eyes. I'll stay. I want to do better. Good. Diego nodded. Because that's all I'm asking from anyone here. Not perfection, just the willingness to do better. He addressed the room. Anyone who can't commit to this can leave now with a fair severance package. Anyone who stays needs to understand. This airline is changing. Today. Nobody moved. Richard Chen stood up. Diego, I've been CEO here for 8 years. I thought we were doing fine. I was wrong. His voice cracked. My own grandsons are half Filipino. They'll fly on this airline someday. I want them treated with respect no matter what they're wearing. Diego studied him. Can you actually lead this change, Richard? Not just talk about it, actually make it happen? Yes, Richard said firmly. I want to fix this. Then you're staying as CEO. But your performance reviews now include diversity metrics, complaint resolution rates, and employee training completion. Richard nodded, relieved. Diego turned to the other executives. I'm giving everyone in this room 1 week to review these new policies. Then we vote. But understand, as majority shareholder, these changes are happening whether you vote yes or no. The only question is whether you're part of the solution. Luis began distributing thick folders to everyone. Meeting adjourned, Diego said. Except you, Christina. Please stay. After everyone else filed out, only Diego, Martha, Luis, and Christina remained. Diego sat across from Christina. Why did you do it? His voice was gentle now. Why did you treat me that way? Christina struggled to speak. I looked at you and made assumptions. You weren't dressed like other first-class passengers. You seemed different. I thought maybe your ticket was upgraded by mistake or... She stopped, ashamed. There's no good excuse. Where are you from? Diego asked. Small town in Iowa. Population 3,000. I've never really been around people who don't look like me until I started this job. Diego nodded slowly. That's not an excuse, but it is an explanation. You can't respect what you don't understand. He showed her another photo on his phone. This is my mother at her sewing machine. She worked as a seamstress her whole life. Her hands were scarred from needle pricks. She never owned more than 3 dresses. But she was the strongest, wisest person I ever knew. Christina looked at the photo, tears flowing again. When you looked at me today, you didn't see me, Diego continued. You saw your assumptions, your limited experience. That's what we're going to fix. Not just for you, for everyone. I'm sorry, Christina whispered. I'm so sorry. I believe you, Diego said. Now show me through action. Help us build something better. Martha and Diego walked through LAX together, an unlikely pair. The retired Mexican-American teacher and the Filipino tech billionaire. What's the first thing that changes? Martha asked. Diego looked back at Gate 51, where another Pacific Star flight was boarding. Families, business people, elderly travelers, students, all kinds of people heading toward the plane. The training starts Monday. Every employee, every level. He paused. And I'm hanging 2 photos in my new office. One of my mother outside the Manila airport, crying. One of this sandwich. He still carried the tray. Martha smiled. Good reminders. Essential reminders. Diego corrected. His phone buzzed. A message from Luis. Christina just submitted a 12-page proposal for the cultural sensitivity training program. She wants to lead the development team. What should I tell her? Diego thought about his mother's words, spoken 1,000 times during his childhood. Ang kawayan ay yumuyuko sa bagyo ngunit hindi nabibale. The bamboo bends in the storm but does not break. He had bent many times in his life, but he had never broken. He typed back. Tell her yes. Everyone deserves the chance to do better. Behind them, Pacific Star Flight 219 pushed back from the gate, beginning its return journey to Manila. On board, a new crew was preparing for service. And on Monday morning, every single one of them would begin learning how to see passengers, not as stereotypes or assumptions, but as human beings who deserved respect. Diego stopped at the airport exit, Martha beside him. The California sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. Your mother would be proud, Martha said softly. Diego looked at the sandwich one last time, then placed it carefully in his briefcase. She used to say that we don't climb mountains for ourselves. We climb them so others can follow. He smiled, finally. Tomorrow, we start building stairs. Martha squeezed his arm. And I'll be watching to make sure you do it right. As they walked into the parking lot, Diego's phone rang. Richard Chen's name appeared on the screen. Mr. Santos. Richard's voice was urgent. I just pulled the complete complaint files. It's worse than we thought. Much worse. Can we meet tonight? Diego looked at Martha, who nodded encouragingly. Send me the address, Diego said. We have work to do. He hung up and took a deep breath. The real work was just beginning. Not the dramatic confrontation. That part was easy. The hard part was the daily commitment to change, the training sessions, the policy updates, the complaints that would still come, the employees who would resist. But as Diego walked toward his rental car, he thought about the 1,247 passengers who had filed complaints, the ones who had been ignored, the ones who had been dismissed. They deserved stairs to climb, and Diego Santos was going to build them. One flight at a time, one employee at a time, one passenger at a time. The sandwich in his briefcase felt lighter now. Not because it had changed, but because its purpose had transformed from evidence of discrimination into a symbol of commitment. The bamboo had bent in the storm. Now it was time to stand tall.